Madhu Chinthavali, for those of you who don't know, from Oak Ridge, pillar lead for this. Before I get started, I want to acknowledge the work that's being presented today as a concept from 3 labs, including our Oak Ridge National Labs, Idaho, and also PNNL. So most of my colleagues are here. As you go through the break sessions, please ask questions. I've got their names on top of the titles of the projects. So for those of you who've been in the other annual meetings or biannual meetings, this was a dynamic wireless charging pillar for the first couple of years for the consortium. Going forward, we came up with this name to incubate some of the ideas we've got and looking at further along high risk R&D research and stuff like that. So that's the purpose of this pillar. That was the end of my presentation. Thanks. That's the vision. It was blind. So going back to the vision statement here, if you can read through a bunch of language in there, the idea here is to incubate the ideas of coming through for 5 to 10 years, looking far ahead. The other pillars are doing great work in establishing the needs of the industry today, answering a lot of these questions. If you look to the infrastructures, the test beds, the charging profiles project you just heard, they're addressing a lot of needs today and the architectures and stuff. But we're trying to get this as incubation idea of concepts that you can actually envision how to go forward. Example, the MCS charging systems. How do we get microgrids to work better as network microgrids, things like that. The goal of this is to actually also introduce component level research and looking at subsystem and prototyping as a service in this consortium as well. There's a lot of industry push for that. I think in the last few months or so, we've been engaging people there. For those of you who can produce the systems, great. For those of you who want prototyping, this is a service that's coming along in the consortium as well, introducing the lab and complexes. The workforce has been a big issue throughout this, leveraging lab systems here with the people behind it. It's going to be a big value added to the consortium. As I can see from the slide, we're trying to do advanced components. What I mean by that is it's not the 1 kV stuff that we have off the shelf today. We're looking at medium voltage devices, 3.3 kV, 6.5 and above. How do you do magnetics for that? How do you reduce the charger size of the future? It doesn't start like you have a charger to buy from Walmart and get it done. It's not going to work like that, right? It's just, or other people that you produce it. It starts with component size, evaluating the resiliency and reliability of those early stage components, working with the vendors at the level, engage another set of industry people into this portfolio of things. We're also looking at standardization of these. So if you have a lot of multiple power stages going through the devices, standardization brings a long way of balance of system cost, serviceability, and O&M cost reduction as well. We're also trying to get into diagnostics and prognostics. I'll get to that in a minute as a separate thrust area, which is also going to serve the community well in the uptime of the chargers and stuff like that. Prototyping, like I mentioned, we're have few technologies out there, DC-DC converters, the DC-AC converters. Can we come up with something novel in the medium voltage space to reduce the size and volume? So novel topologies with the magnetics in there. The controls and software side, there's a lot of real-time management issues we're facing with the converters and chargers today, especially for transient operation for grid services. If you look at control services, especially for bidirectional grid, it's not there as a standard yet. So we need to get that up there to look at real-time transition controls. How do you change modes automatically for autonomous operations from PQ to VF control modes, which is really looking advanced for the chargers going out there. All these are great stories like you've seen from other pillars. We have to demonstrate a use case to evaluate these. We'll try to do as much as in test beds and real-time CHL platforms going forward. The other thing I want to highlight here is we're trying to be synergistic in this pillar. Research is always there in the DNA of DOE, as you guys know in other programs. We're trying to bring Office of Electricity and GMLC coordination here as well, with our lab partners coming into play as well into that. So one of the things I want to boldly put out this, I want to have comments, suggestions, and feedback from you guys. Most of you have been in the grid space, are used to the SAIDI and KD, right? Customer outage stuff and the system outage interruption frequency. In the spirit of that, can we come up with metrics like this as an outcome for this pillar? Everything targets towards the metrics. Resilience is a very hard thing to quantify and qualify. So we come up with some metrics to say, okay, station interruption average frequency, number of interruptions that a customer faces, right? The second thing could be in the spirit of SAIDI, you can say outage duration is a metric. The last thing we want to introduce in that is how much energy have you actually recovered? Let's say you have an outage in the station. How much energy do you have? How much have you actually supplied? How much you have actually recovered? It could be a metric to that, right? Instead of serving 10 cars as an example, can we serve 2? That's also another metric to come up with. So the idea here is to focus on the customer outage stuff more than the system outage. But again, it's actually embedded inside it. So it's more customer related resiliency index in it. So the tools and mechanisms you're going to come up with in this pillar are going to address most of those. The framework, the ideology behind fault conditions, how do you do transient fault with the new architectures, how do you respond to them, how do you curtail the fault within the station when you have multiples of those. So with that said, I want to introduce a few thrust areas in this under which we're trying to bucket our projects. I'll get to that portfolio in a minute. But if you look at the first thing, that vehicle charge and grid interface technology, I've lumped that into one thing called topologies. I'll repeat that again because the component technology we have today are morphing and changing. So can we take advantage of to come up with, balance the system cost? Even actually address the supply chain issues we're facing today, right? The other thing I want to bring into play here is talking to industry off late. There's a synergistic activity going on between topologies required for heavy duty vehicles, medium duty, and also EV toll. If you look at, there's a really cross-cut going on there. So can we leverage those industry members in here and see what needs to be changed in the interfaces while use the same power blocks or power distribution units going forward? The second part is the resilient charging stuff. Like I said, for resiliency, the first word comes up is autonomous, right? If you take autonomous response for each charger and a station, can we embed those functions inside to respond to them before anything comes and tells them what to do with? The other thing we also want to look at is data privacy and ownership and data strategy. This is a lot of words in there. It's a lot of work being going on, to be honest with you guys, because when we want to do advanced controls, privacy comes into play, right? There's a lot of architectures out there saying who owns what. As we scale these things, how do we share the data? If I decide not to share the data with you, I can't do the controls. So we need to look at the boundary conditions under which I have privacy, data ownership, and data strategy coming together to get advanced controls. Otherwise, you're never going to benefit out of this, right? The middle part, you heard the word AI. It's all over the place, but it's basically algorithms, right? You're looking at algorithms to detect, control, and also respond to this stuff. That's been a part of the story we're leveraging from the eVision project. For those of you who know before, I'll walk into that portfolio in a minute again, but we're looking at subsystem power diagnostics and also looking at optimization for controls. So far, if you look at literature, there's a lot of optimization based on energy management. We always do pricing curves, energy management. Can you put reliability and resiliency into optimization? This is very challenging. You have to hold parameters down at the bottom level to feed up to your optimization routines and then respond in state machine fashion. That's a lot of science and math that needs to be put in, but it's actually doable. So you can actually predict the outage based on the resources you bring in, especially bring DERs in. You have to know the state of the charge of the stationary unit. You also have to have PV prediction, not for energy management or energy pricing anymore. We need to move past that and put the contingency into it. As simple as oversizing a converter could be one of the solutions you have to have for contingency. We're not doing optimization there at all, especially the capacitance that you put in. So last thing I want to bring to your attention is the fact that in future, right, there's a lot of stations we're looking at truck centers where you have light duty, medium duty, or fleet operators. In this, how do you do a network of microgrids? There's other work going on other places. You look at multiple controllers come into place, and also looking at station segments that can operate interoperably and also island themselves. So islanding is a big condition for microgrid. It's not black start, it's actually transient islanding that you can do at the charger level and also islanding within the station. That's going to be a lot of challenge to do that. So these are some thrust areas and high-level stories. Like I said earlier, this is an incubation idea of this pillar to have multiple ideas come together, but this will morph over time, and all the words look very similar to current work, but we're also put the light into future work going forward. So as you can see, there's a lot of capability in the lab. Like I keep saying that for you guys to leverage and use the technology behind it, not just the infrastructure, the people and the resources. We put a lot of effort in hiring the right teams together, and putting that experience to play is also another thing you want to leverage on it. So I know there's been a lot of putting a lot of work into the hardware and learning system for detection. There's been a lot of publication. We did a joint publication last year with the 3 labs looking at resiliency metrics at different levels, from the charger to the vehicle interface all the way up to the station. So if you don't have that, please reach out to me. I'll send that copy. It talks about the framework of how you want to execute these, the detection. So if you look at the DNA of this approach, it's detection first, analyzing, controls, and restore, right? These are 4 methods we are trying to bring into the picture. INL's been doing a lot of work. Today, we don't have MCS, right? They're being produced, but they've done the frameworks to understand the detection methodology with AI ML prediction with hardware systems in place. They're going to leverage that to MCS going forward. PNL has been great at looking at the system level wide area stuff. They've been developing tools and frameworks, like leveraging other labs as well, and bringing that Helix to the play here. At Oak Ridge, we're known for bottom-up component to subsystem level stuff. We have advanced technology prototyping capability. It looked ones and tens, not the hundreds you expect from the industry. We also have real-time simulation platforms, which actually gets into the hardware of the controls itself. So you can do the communication hardware, and especially the DSP and the microcontrollers that you need for diagnostics. That's going to be another platform called CODIS in there. So this is how we're leveraging our facilities today to support the pillar going forward. This is not just built overnight. This is about 3, 4, 5 years of work that's been done by all of our teams, put together platforms for you guys. So with that, taking that forward, I want to take 4 of these. This is a new version of this pillar, as I told you before. We're going to get into 5 different projects. I'll explain that in my best of ability, but there are some PIs are here. Please walk through. When you find them, please ask the questions. The first one is the advanced charging stuff in the buckets. We have 2 projects in there. Resiliency charging platforms, prognostics, and network. We have that MCS resiliency going across from Oak Ridge. PNL is going to continue to do the MCS charging architectures going forward, and INL is going to continue the MCS from the low voltage work we've been doing. So with that, I'm going to walk you through one of these, all these projects at the high level. So like I said earlier, if you look at the state of the art today, there is 500 volts to 900 volts, almost 1 kV DC output, multiple chargers available for purchase today from multiple vendors. What we're addressing here is bidirectionality. They do have some of that claimed, and there's a lot of work going behind the scenes, if you will, talking to them, but can we address the bidirectionality in a way that we can do transient islanding? So I call it a grid forming charger. So you have an architecture with DC or AC. How do you transient operate within the islanding conditions we can do? Grid forming controls there are about 6 or 7 modes of grid forming controls. Everything is not grid forming. So we have to delve into that more and look at resiliency for the charger from that standpoint. For that, we're actually trying to do a similar network, trying to get the vehicle emulator. Most of the focus is in the front end here. We're trying to do bidirectional stuff with that and look at how do you transient go from one mode to the other, and also try to get an islanding mode of working for that. Where it comes into play is when you put a storage here. You can actually leverage the storage per the charger, per island, and actually form the grid forming charger that you want. Bidirectionality today, the EV is treated as energy storage element, which is not true. There's a lot of communication, there's response times. The ramp rates are going to prevent you from doing the bidirectional charging if you're not careful. So this is enabling the front end, but actually looking at systems integration wide across it. So how do you go from the time you have an impact on the transient side of the load or transient side of the grid? How do you respond that and protect the resiliency metric that I talked about to get the customer not to have the outage there? So that's one, a lot of focus in here. We're going to do a prototype on the front end. Very low power. It's not just through the muscle power here. This is showing the controls. It'll be 100 kilowatt demonstration going through the DC-DC converter that we already have. Either this can be isolated or non-isolated, doesn't matter. The work's focused on the front end, like I said before. So this will be one single vehicle looking at transient analysis and throwing the ramp rate controls, the protection equipment putting in there, and also using the contactor response. This is a good test platform where you can put solid state breakers as well going forward to see what the response time could be. At some point, the DC is the arc welding, and you're never going to recover from. So it's not going to be one size fits all solution. So it's where we're going with it, right? The second project is focusing on years of work we've done in the inductive coupling methods, but this is looking at a multi-port system which can have conductive or inductive systems. So if you look at the 5 stages of conversion, you have the grid to the vehicle. There are 5 stages of power conversion. The only difference in that is wired or wireless. Why can that be blocks that we can leverage from each other? If you like the wireless solution or not, the technology is still the same, right? The grid interface is the same. The coupling mechanism can be changed. So can we do plug and play? That's where this project is going on. It's called a high frequency AC link based AC architecture. What it also gives you resiliency in terms of the parameters you can change is the frequency of operation on the fly. So that could be a signature for each given station. It could be more secure. So this is where this looking further into reliability and how we get flexibility and interoperability addressed with these. So this is, again, not starting from scratch. We have enough technology and prototypes built. We're actually going to leverage and do multi-port systems with the high frequency AC link. The frequency is yet to be determined. This can actually be a very power dense stuff and actually a modular solution. You can just plug and play the wire or wireless part of it, right? This third project is taking into account a lot of the work we've done in the past. We've come up with a tool called Electric Vehicle Station Analytics tool, which actually spits out data. It can run for about 24 hours, gives you tons and tons of data on the architecture. We've done 5 chargers with the storage on that under the eVision project, looking at resiliency. Taking that forward to MCS, it's a big question. If you followed our work in the last few years, we've done the 13.8 kV interface. This is a joint project with us and NREL. Looking at medium voltage, but we want to take a step back to address some of the current issues. If you take a regular inverter, which is megawatt scale, and scale it, how do you actually split this architecture to serve multiple vehicles in here? So this is going to be the MCS resiliency architecture that we're trying to do. And also, like I said earlier, we're trying to get the microgrids, multiple microgrid controlled aggregation going on here. So microgrids are really going into space where it used to be just a battery storage, a genset behind the meter, and we call it a microgrid. There are about 600 to 700 microgrids in US today. We've learned a lot from those, but the paradigm shift that's happening right now is you take a region of 20, 30 miles, how do you island those with the breakers coming into play, form the actual regional microgrid? So you're talking about a wide range of distribution network. If you apply the same methods to this, you can have a truck charging station about 30 acres or so. How do you bring that multiple microgrids together to coordinate with them? That's not going to be easy. So that's another thing we're trying to bring into this as well, looking into the future. The fourth project is a lot of work done, like I said. If you guys get the slides, please read through. This is a lot of good work that went on with INL. They've come up with a framework of AI, ML, looking at multiple data, came out the EVS equipment they already have at the lab, right? But what is interesting here is it's not only taking the communications into play, it's also take the physics-based and the machine learning models, which is very, very hard to do. You have to understand the mechanism of charging, the architectures of the chargers, the actual interfaces that go with it, and come up with models with it. What they also have done really effectively, in my opinion, is coming up with a framework which is agnostic to the EVSE equipment, my opinion of it, right? They can always scale this, look at the same framework, how do you expand to the MCS? So we know that MCS is not there today in any of the labs. Some labs are pursuing that, the vendors are doing it. But what they're trying to do is, again, project the future, saying if the MCS architecture is valid, like the one I showed in the previous slide, how do you actually do that? On top of this, they've done an SIS model, SIS module, which plugs and play into your actual test equipment, not test equipment, the EVSE itself. So if I have multiple SISs coordinating this, I have a watchdog physical hardware circuit and a framework inside of physical models, which I don't want to call a digital twin. I hate the word personally, but it's just a watchdog circuit, which has real physical based models and both software and hardware working together. So it's a very good framework. Taking that forward, it'll be very challenging because this is just done with a couple of EVS equipments. Well, if you have an island of chargers or the MCS with multiple modules, it's going to be challenging. So they're going to use their tools and framework and work with us to see how far we can take the SIS concept. The other thing I want to mention, just to be clear, since this was on the cyber pillar before, we've moved this into this to focus on just physical anomalies while the cyber work continues on the cyber pillar. So what Barney is going to present is focused on taking a new platform, taking the SIS further into cyber physical stuff. We're actually doing just resilience physical anomaly here. So that's just a slight deviation from what we're doing before. The last project I have here is from PNNL. Like I said, they've been looking at station architectures and stuff like that. But if you look at multi-port systems like these, resiliency is not easy. They're trying to get the grid impacts of it. So when I said grid impacts, you're talking about frequency, voltage regulation. These are standard drop-down menu questions that you have, 10 of those, but it's not that. It's actually looking at operations of the station. the operations have completely different control parameters. So if you give the MCS architecture we're putting together, like I said in the paper, and how the SIS works together, the architecture is completely novel. They're looking at operation metrics inside the charging station. I've told the tools before, but one of the gaps we're solving right now is I think the grid compatibility. A few of you asked the questions early in the morning. What is the grid compatibility for future megawatt stations coming together? We don't have an answer for that. So with their knowledge of the grid side, the distribution grid operations, the aggregation, plus you're looking at the operations within the station, you combine these two, then you have the better answer. Because the operations are very different from planning. We always rely on planning tools and say, this is a function that I can do. When it comes to operations, we don't have an answer on resiliency as well. So with that, that's my last slide. Again, there's not a lot of results for you guys. As I've mentioned, this is a new pillar. I'm sorry, a renamed pillar, which you're trying to do the work. In the next meeting, I promise you more. And I'll put all the PIs in front. I'll step away from it. They can answer first. With that, I'll take questions.
We're trying to stand this up. And so there we go. All the input we can get at this formulation stage. I mean, we have some good plans that we're starting on, but it really does help us make sure we're doing the most effective things. So any questions? Thanks, Ted.
Is it true or not true? Like codes and standards. True or not true? Codes and standards directly overlaps the other pillars. That's a question.
Sorry.
Codes and standards work.
I was walking back and forth. So.
Overlaps.
Yes.
Your work. Meaning the stuff you said that doesn't exist is going to be covered in the next slides that exists.
Sorry. Yeah. I stole his thunder a little bit.
Not thunder, just contradicting your statement of it doesn't exist. It exists.
It exists. Okay. I apologize. Stand corrected.
That's a statement and a question.
Well, we have to develop and demonstrate the technologies before we can get consensus, since most codes and standards activities are consensus based, to move those standards forward, right? So that's part of the reason why we have to do this sort of development activities. Is why demonstration is important. We have to learn on the ground, see what works, what doesn't work, and then help take that information and inform our codes and standards activities.
Well,
so anyone else have a question?
To Andrew's point, I think this is an opportunity to put in a small concept that you guys think you want to evaluate and use the consortium model to go through that as a use case. We'll be happy to entertain that, right? So.
Thank you. Half a year ago, you were standing there and introducing the pillar, and you were indicating that you were going to run some stakeholder outreach. And so can you share some of the insights that you have gained from this stakeholder outreach as to what they would like to see you do?
Sure, Mike. So I haven't run a survey yet. If you're looking at a standardized format to get more information, the little I've learned is the fact that we need prototyping. There's about 4 companies who came to us saying, I need the help in prototyping. One of the direct stuff, right? The second thing we've seen is there's communication questions that's being addressed in the consortium, right? So when I ask them, what interoperability do we have in communication standards, but they're not looking at controls and communications together. So that's the second feedback I've got. The third one is, do you have MCS capability of testing? I said, we do have in other labs, not us, when I talk to them, but we haven't done the framework enough to understand the architecture. So there's 3 things I've got out of that in my 5+ months plus the winter break I took, Michael, so far. But I think to your point, it's not done yet. Thanks for reminding on that. We want to do a formal survey on wide audience to say, what concepts do you want to see developed under these? This is not a demonstration project like other pillars are doing. This is incubation of smaller ideas to address in the 4 thrust areas. So it's more easy to engage with this pillar. So appreciate that input.
Is your vision of the future that someone who does not know much about energy or power can say, okay, my site has a generator with this rating and a battery attached storage with this rating, And therefore, in the case of a resilience event, it can support the chargers for X number of hours just by doing simple arithmetic? Or is your vision of the future that we have to hire an electronic power engineer to work for 3 months to configure a bespoke solution for our system? And you can guess which one I'm hoping the answer is.
Yeah, so the vision, not the second one for sure. The target is to develop tools in the collectively across the lab spaces, if you will. Put enough metrics and like the tool today, if you come to my lab, I can show you the exact architecture, you plug and play. It not only gives you the planning, I want to correct, again, add more to what you ask as a vision. It's not just the planning. How do you virtually operate the system in real time? To all the conditions for resiliency metrics, you can meet that. So you have to generate tons and tons of data, which is not there in industry. You don't, even if you take a pilot demonstration going on today, they're not going to run all the cases for you. It could be a software glitch to a credit card glitch we're facing. You walk into a Walmart with 6 or 7 and 3 of them are out. You have no idea why they're out, right? So can we virtualize all of this? But once we come up with this framework, the other pillars can actually demonstrate for you. That's the way we see it as a vision, right? This is just virtualization of tools and platforms that you can actually plug and play. And we're not expecting you to have a real-time platform with $8 million behind it and software licenses. It should be a tool that everybody can use and plug into our systems for you to get the answer, a web interface, if you will. That's the value of the tool and platform. So you should be able to run future load growth, load curtailment, and also looking at current planning, economics-based and operations-based build. I said 6 words in there, which is very hard to do. That's my retirement plan to get it done. But to your point, the vision is to keep these tools and platforms flexible enough and open enough that you guys can use it. You should never hold it ransom to the infrastructure in the labs. That's the vision. Yeah.
Hi there, Tom here from PACCAR. That's loud. Just got a quick question about the scope of these projects and interoperability with other charging networks, other charging methodologies. As products today have CCS standards, or there'll be NACS standards, and in the future will be MCS standards. Is there going to be interoperability for future charging stations to be able to support a variety of these projects and products, whichever charging standard the product itself uses and whichever the operator prefers? Or will these projects be if it's an MCS exclusive station or MCS exclusive support?
No, if you go back to my 4 thrust areas I had, I can answer that before Ted jumps on the next talk. I don't want to talk about it. On the codes and standards, they're sort of you're educating ourselves to the codes and standards pillar to say what's out there, what's coming, right? But somebody has to execute those and demonstrate it. That's one of the visions. But to your point, these are supposed to be agnostic to the scale, the voltage, and the size of the stations. So they should be able to serve the purpose of the use case that you bring into the table. And a prognostic method on a modular system, doesn't matter what the size is, it has to scale, right? A SIS platform that INO is developing should plug and play into your EVSE, irrespective of what your charge power is or the voltage you're trying to do, or the vehicle size you're doing it. So this should be more agnostic technologies that can scale and or plug and play into systems going forward, irrespective of the use case. That's the vision of that. But the codes and standards interoperability is being addressed over there, but they'll feed into this as saying, this is a specific use case, a specific problem. How do you guys see it solving these in bits and pieces? And then you get this, my vision is to get and demonstrate into each project that has infrastructure built in to actually demonstrate that. That's the way it's going to go.